Welcome to Leadership Luminaries Lounge with Kerry and Peggy O'Neill, a podcast about the connection of leadership, philosophy, practice, and impact on society. Get ready to be illuminated.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Leadership Luminaries Lounge. As you can see, we've kind of changed around a different lounge. We'll have to let you know where we are because we really don't know from our virtual background. But if that's something interesting we can find out about. Today is a special guest, and our conversation today is about faith and leadership. And so our special guest is one of my colleagues from the Doctorate of Business Administration program at Georgia State. And we're fellow mature students, I'll put it that way, so that you won't feel too we're the old guys of the class. But anyway, I wanted to read a little bit about our special guest background, his bio. His name is Seth Spurlock, and Seth is the founder and president of Bulk Chemical Services LLC, a Georgia-based specialty chemical manufacturer established in 2005. The business manufactures polycrylate polymers, hope I said that right, and biocides, and produces and provides specialty chemicals and custom manufacturing services to chemical, paper, and mining companies from locations in Georgia, Texas, and Wisconsin. He's also president of the Georgia Mining Association and chair of the Committee for Good Government and Governing Board. The association is an industry advocacy group comprised of over 150 companies with mining, chemical, transportation, and allied businesses in Georgia, focusing on environmental, safety, and regulatory matters. Previously, as president and CEO of Vinings Industries Incorporated, Seth led a management buyout from LaPorte PLC and served as CEO for 6 years before selling to another company, Chimera Incorporated. During the combined 10-year period as CEO of Chimera Chemicals and Chimera Chemicals Canada, the successor company to Vinings, revenues grew to $245 million with over 650 employees. In addition to 9 acquisitions were negotiated and successfully integrated. An amazing statistic here, and the lost time accident rate was reduced from 7 to less than 1 per million hours, the best in the Chimera company, and only 25% of the chemical industry standard. That's for you quality geeks like me and the rest of them. That is actually 6 Sigma, better than 6 Sigma performance. 4 per million is actually 6 Sigma. As the owner of BCS, Seth is responsible for all aspects of the business, including operations, R&D, finance, capital investment, and has seen revenue grow over 9-fold during the 17-year period. However, he considers attracting and retaining high-quality personnel as the key to the company success. BCS has an excellent health, safety, environmental record and has completed an ISO 9001-2015 certification and implemented a business enterprise system called Spiro. Seth was granted several patents for application of novel biocides in mineral slurries and oil fields. He has a Master's of Business Administration degree from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, a Bachelor of Science in Applied Science with a major in Paper Science and Engineering from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. He's married with 4 children, 2 grandchildren, a member of Johnson Ferry Baptist Church in the Metro Atlanta area, a part-time farmer, enjoys reading, guitar, and outdoor sports, hunting, fly fishing, mountain and road biking. I think he just got back from a tour in Europe, a biking tour after doing an immersive study program of German in Austria. Skiing, a certified open water scuba diver, and a German B1 language speaker and current student. And if all things work out as planned, 2026, he and I will complete our dissertations and be doctors of business administration. Welcome to the lounge, Seth. Man, I tell you, how do you have time to do all of this stuff?
That was quite
Oh, you know what? I guess when you get to be, I'll say my age, I won't say yours, but yeah, I would tell people when you have been in the industry for 42 years, the introduction can go long, and there was a short one, but maybe I should have
Well,
sent you that.
Oh, that was
That
fun.
was-
That was great. That's awesome.
well, yeah, that was very interesting, and thank you for that welcome. And it's yeah, when I hear it, I think, wow, that this guy must be old, right? So, so
I didn't
Kerry
hear
and Peggy,
that.
let me start by saying thank you for that. It was and thank you for inviting me onto this program. I looked at some of the previous shows. I have to tell you, I was really impressed with the people you had on and the caliber of the discussions that you had. And I just feel it's a real privilege for me to do this and to talk about the subject that you wanted to bring up in terms of faith and leadership. And I just think that's a broad, very interesting subject and something that kind of takes me back to the very beginning of my career. And so first of all, thank you for doing this. And I'm looking forward to our discussion. And I like the new lounge. I don't know. I feel like I should have maybe a brandy snifter and a cigar or something. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, we should be doing the brandy thing or something here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
next time we'll be in Peggy's coffee lounge or somewhere, and go from there. But yeah, thanks very much. Appreciate you inviting me.
Seth and I spend a lot of time when we're together in our residencies talking about integrity and matters of faith and the actual practical application of that. And that was particularly the reason I wanted to chat with him about it. And some of the conversations that Seth and I have had is about some of those challenges about being able to live out your values while you're in the business world. But one of the things Peggy and I have talked about a lot is that it's crucial, we believe, in order for an organization to be successful, the leader has to have a high level of integrity. And that means you need to be true to who you are. And because who you are will shine forth regardless of what you say. Peggy, you want to start off leading the conversations? I've been chatting a bunch already, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So how do you, so as a lead, obviously an incredible leader in your company, in your industry, and how you live your life, how do you marry faith in the workplace in a way that I'm going to assume, makes it comfortable for people? And so could you start us off with how do you approach bringing faith into your leadership, and do you talk about it in the organization, or how do you talk about it in a way that it opens up for other people? Is that an okay place to start?
Yeah, and I think that's very good. I think that's the very kind of the nub of the heart of the matter, if you will, when you get to it, especially in leadership. And I'll just tell you, and I'll make it, somewhat brief in terms of just the journey that, you get to. At least I look at it in leadership, and I won't run through that long resume again, but I've been in leadership roles for 30 or 35 years, and been president of companies for 30 years. So my time goes way back to to that period of time when I first started as president of a company, and I look at and even that, as your vice president, you take leadership roles at lower levels in the organization. I think it starts with, for me, it was what's kind of the core belief system that you bring in that role. Where what's your foundation for the philosophy of how you're going to live your life, and I think there's different ways to go about it. I mean, people can have faith in different things. Some people get all kinds of academic degrees and background and research and really have faith in their knowledge of the academic world or certain philosophies or theories, and they apply those throughout their lives. And others may read great business books and apply certain theories in that, and in what they do. And mine has evolved over time, even when I was in college and since then, around the Christian faith. And so that was really what formed the basis for where I come from and the approach that I take and what I try to talk with our management team, with employees that come in. And we set what I hope to think is a fairly high standard. So even though, to take your question about how do we handle that, our part of our principles or our mission statement for the company say we want to operate our business in an ethical and moral manner. And from there, it doesn't talk about the specific chemistries or the markets we're going to be in or anything like that. It just talks about who we want to be. And so what I do is in my orientation with employees, I don't sit down and talk to them about the chemistry or the markets or the regulatory issues or safety programs. We do all that. I spend an hour with them just talking about who are we and who do we want to be as a company? How do we treat each other? Because we hire people from around the world. We also hire people locally who've all gone to school together, and sometimes that's beneficial, sometimes not. And I just try to tell them, hey, look, here's how we treat each other inside and kind of inside the company. And if I'm at the plant, I say, inside the fence line, that you may have issues from high school and people remember you a certain way, but that's not how we talk to each other. We don't refer to each other by some nickname of something you did wrong back in high school. We try to elevate that and treat each other with dignity and respect and talked about things like, we have different levels of standard, where we say it, some people are immersed in the law and say, well, we want to come, we want to do everything from a regulatory, environmental, and legal aspect. And certainly we want to do that. That's the basic line, is what I tell them. We don't want to just legally comply. We also then want to take it up to a higher level and say, we want to do what's ethically right, not just what's legally right, what we can get away with. And then our standard, I try to even take it to the higher standard and say, we want to do what's morally right. And I also give it the caveat of, I try to live my life that way, but I'm going to disappoint you every day. It's a process you go through. You never attain it. I mean, you just keep working towards that. But if you're working towards these higher standards, you don't have to worry about legal compliance. And the bigger you get with more people spread around the country, and sometimes in earlier in my career, in the US and Canada, and these people are sometimes working 24 hours, 7 days a week, different times, I mean, different schedules, if the operations are that way. You really want to make sure when that decision's made at 2 o'clock in the morning on Friday night and you're not there, that they know what the standard is. And the standard isn't if you make a mistake to try to cover it up or to fudge a number because you're trying to get something out, and all these things can go on. They look back and say, no, that's not who we are. That's not how we're going to conduct ourselves. We're just going to own up to it and deal with it now before it becomes a bigger problem. And if I can let people know that that's the standard we operate from the beginning, it comes from me, and they should see it throughout the organization, then that's what I hope that when they make that decision. And certainly they can't sit in some meeting and go, well, I didn't know what, I didn't know if this would be right or wouldn't be wrong. And that has to go down through all the organization. It can't just be me saying that and then I leave and they're like, yeah, right, but that's not really how it happens. It has to be the next management layer down, all the way down to the supervisor, and then that individual has that. And most of the time that's very well received, and I don't think it doesn't offend anyone. I feel like, and I tell them I come at it from a Christian perspective, and that's where I draw my philosophy from. Because I always say, I look at it and say, if I'm a follower of Christ in the teachings, then being compliant with HR issues around discrimination and, for age and sexual orientation and ethnic origin and all the other, the list gets longer and longer. I mean, the government can add as many categories as they want, but if your standard is up here, that's just something you have to put in your handbook and talk about, because we're not going to do those things, whatever the next category is. And those are just like little examples where I think where you can take, where I take, the faith and say you can apply it to different areas, and whether it's in HR and environmental safety, all these different stewardship things, and even the financials. I'll tell you what's really, makes you feel really good about progress you've made is when somebody makes a mistake internally, and we've done this before, and we forgot to change a price for a customer, for example, we were overbilling them for 6 months, and then finally we caught it. And what we did is we went back, calculated the number, issued the credit to them, and called them up, said, hey, here's what happened, this was done. And I heard about it after it was done. Nobody called me and said, here's where we're at, what should we do? I mean, and I felt really good because they just knew it was absolute no-brainer that that's how they should act and what they should do. And it happens every day. There's an issue here, somebody doesn't bill us for this, somebody, ships us something that, they didn't invoice us for. We credit somebody back that we shouldn't have. I mean, these decisions are made thousands, hundreds of times,
Sorry to interrupt. So
please, I'm sorry. That's
here
just
that you share your faith. Then do you ask them their faith, or how do you see, or do you all have some sort of workshops or conversations about what are your ethics, the other person's ethics? I mean, how do you find out, or how do you? I mean, I hear you. You're a powerful. I mean, you exude your faith. So obviously that like permeates the culture because of who you are, how you relate. I mean, I can really experience that. But then how do you incorporate that beyond, you. So again, do y'all talk about faith? Do other people speak up about their faith, or do you have workshops around where you talk about ethics and morality? So how does that, how do you work with other people um, to find out where they're coming from and how they're going to approach it?
You're right, right. No, I think that's also a very good question because I think it comes in kind of different ways. It exists throughout the business because when they come in, I start with that as the standard, and this is what we do. And it's not a matter of faith and saying, this belief in Christ as it is, this is what the outcome is. This is how we conduct ourselves. And frankly, I tell them it's kind of non-negotiable. I mean, I don't know, it's like we're going to treat each other this way, and anything that's not like that is going to be called out. And I said, and if I do something that's inconsistent with that, if you really think that I do or say something or I've said something that is inappropriate, and it happens, Peggy. I mean, I start my day trying to get started on the right foot. 5 minutes after I do that, somebody calls me up and I use a word I shouldn't have used, or I feel the blood go to my head, and it's just like, and then I start over again at lunchtime, and I start over again at dinner, and then I start, and it's just this constant striving towards that. But I don't. There isn't. When I say it's non-negotiable, it's like we are going to treat each other. I'm going to treat you a certain way with dignity and respect, regardless of any of these other issues as a person. And somebody who doesn't or has a derogatory comment, it's just not going to be permitted. I mean, I tell people if you're outside and you want to operate your life some other way outside of the business, that's up to you. But in here, we're going to treat people this way, and we're not going to say these things. We're not going to, make these kind of decisions about the business. We're a growing and profitable business with really good people who are looking for us to provide that leadership, that stewardship of the business, and to help them along the way. And it's to call them to a higher level. And so, and I think that crosses over many different, either religious or whether it's, any of the religions typically call you towards that. It's a higher power. It's not inherent in the law, The law should protect those things, in my opinion. You're trying to strive for something that's much beyond that. And of all the times I've had that, I've never had anybody say anything. I do ask people I said, if I disappoint you, don't call me out in the meeting, but call me out afterwards so I can look back and say, yeah, I think you're right, or let's talk about this. Just like I wouldn't call somebody else out in the meeting and say, no, it's not what but I would talk to them separately, or the management would just say, yeah, probably not the best way to handle that. And if I need to apologize for somebody, you do, and then you can just go on. But I mean, for 30 years, I've done it in the same way, and it just continues to work. And and I like to think that people feel good about where they work, and they really, and I have a lot of people, and maybe it's just, I don't know, the people we hire and the people we keep, we have very low turnover. We have excellent personnel. And I have a lot of competitors and others ask me, like, how do you get these people? Why do they stay? I'm like, it's kind of like, what do you mean by that? But, at the same time, like they stay for a lot of good reasons. A lot of it is the culture we create. And companies have different cultures and they succeed in totally different cultures. I mean, different ways they want to operate. We just want to operate it this way. And we want people to be part of that and feel good about it. And if there's an individual issue, I mean, we would bring it up, I mean, whether it's specific different faith issue, but I would tell you it's in all the years, it's not happened for me.
So Seth, that was one piece. And I think you were, and I was wanting to press a little bit further what Peggy was saying. Do you have to be a Christian to be successful in the culture of your business, or do you have to buy into the higher moral framework of your culture?
Certainly you do not have to be a Christian. And most people that's an individual decision. And I think Peggy asked me if I asked them, and I do not, because I think that there's probably some legal aspects of to inquire about those kind of things. Yeah, I can share what I think, and these are principles, right? I mean, we're going to treat people a certain way. We're going to conduct our business in certain aspects, and so those are universal truths. I mean, to me, and they're not. I happen to drive them from a Christian perspective, but at the same time, I don't ask people about it, and you don't have to be. I don't really know what everyone is. I'm sure we have people who are agnostic and Mormon and atheist and Catholics and Baptists and whatever. That's their own individual choice. I'm really focused, I guess, when we talk about faith. That is where my faith. That's where I come from.
Yeah.
And then it's the principles. When I say we're going to operate our business in a moral and ethical manner, I mean, okay, you can pick that from maybe the law, or you can just say, that was handed down by Moses, or however you want to get there. But, I just don't see a conflict in that, and I never really had it be a conflict.
Yeah, Peggy and I often violently agree on those higher
Yeah,
moral values. So
yeah,
yeah, we come from a little bit different faith or philosophical perspective, even. But we violently agree on those
yeah.
moral
That's
character.
good, Kerry. And I think most people do, and they want to see that. And I also don't hold myself up as some pious, walking around, because that's why I always tell people, as I said to you, and on this program, is that I may disappoint you before this thing's over, before we're having our conversation. But and I'll reflect back on it and say, maybe I could have done this better or said that better, and I hope I didn't,
Well, I think
alienate
more and
somebody
more
in some
people
way.
are desiring this sort of sense that you're talking about. I was associated with the Sam Walton Tyson Center for Faith and Spirituality in the Workplace at the University of
Wow.
Arkansas. I was one of the coaches on the team of that organization for a period of time, and so we had conferences that were where people came and spoke about faith and spirituality in the workplace, and so but different organizations, of course, have different practices and ways they integrate that. But I think
Yeah.
more and more people are just really hungry for that sense of being called forth to a higher way of being, to be invited into a more full expression of themselves as human beings, and to be able to really care about other people. The old horrible adage is business is not personal. That's the worst. That's so wrong.
Yeah.
but people
Uh,
want the personal aspect. That's really why
yeah.
they work in a workplace to begin with, for the most
Yeah,
part.
and Peggy, that's why I see it as well as it's about the people. I mean, as much as we like to think, oh, nobody can replace our chemistry and our this or that, they can. Yeah. But what we have are the people and the way they act and conduct themselves, and that's what people see. They visit our plant, they'll never see a product. I mean, it's in a tank, it's in, it should be in a tank, in a truck, in a drum, or whatever. They never see it. They see the housekeeping, they see the people, they see the enthusiasm, they see, is it a positive work environment where people seem like, they're not running around, their hair on fire, but they're busy and they're engaged and they're treating each other well. That's the impression they have. And they say, okay, from there, I think people say, oh, the products must be good, the testing must be accurate. These are good people. These are people I want to work with. And that's how we have continued to follow that formula, and it continues to work. But I think, what you saw is, did you see in the academy there where people were aspiring to want their leaders to be that way, right? So you almost have to put on that cloak at a certain degree and say, do I feel like this every day? Do I want to be called on? Because every time we have an event, and this has happened probably in the last month, maybe a dozen times. So it isn't like it's just a passing phase, but you're called on to speak about something, maybe it's a prayer time, maybe it's an event that's going on in the process, or somebody's having a health issue, or they just want you to go up there and say, we just had this a couple of weeks ago where it's like, can you do this? It's like, of course. I always say yes. I've been with customers sitting at a breakfast table, and we were in San Antonio with a group of people, fairly loud, and somebody said, "Oh, can somebody say the blessing?" I wasn't going to call on that to do that, but I said, "Of course I will." I mean, I just think you get, because people want to see that. So I don't know if you saw that. The people who are participating, is that what they want to see in the leadership? That they want to see a higher, a ethical, moral leader, I would think, that's representing their firm. Regardless, I would say regardless of where they get their ethics from, but they're calling for that, looking for that. That's what I'm saying, seeking it. Yeah.
Yeah, just the challenge is how leaders are going about, if they're going about it like it's imposing, or you can tell that a specific religion is important or something like that, even though illegally they can't do that, but you can get a feel for that. But anyway, we didn't see that with all the people that came to the
Yeah.
conference. It was more what you're talking about, but people curious, how do we bring that into the workplace and
Right.
not have people feel intimidated or concerned or proselytized to, that's the right way to say that. But because yes, people are hungry for them. I mean, there's research done on this, that when people are happier and better performing when there's spirituality in the workplace, however that gets defined.
And
You
I
know, I
think there's
think
a
that
difference in being able to talk about the components of that and be able to talk about, well, what, I don't lead by saying I did it in this program because this is what we're talking about. We're friends here, and so we say this is where do you get that from? And I don't want to spend an hour with you and you say, oh well, I get it from the Bible and from my following of Christ. I tell you that now. I don't say that in the meeting just because it's more important to me. These are the aspects that we're going to. Now, if somebody asks me, by all means, I share that with them. And if, and I would tell you, there are just so many. Yeah, I talked to a group of students. This is probably 25 years ago at one of these foundations I was on, and we were talking just about what you get out of the program when you come to the university. And I tell them, you focus on the three things, which are body, mind, and spirit. You want to come and not just be brilliant when you leave, but you're completely out of shape and you've lost all your physical integrity because all you did was study. And same thing, you don't want to come with being in great shape, participating in sports, learned a lot, but you're spiritually just void. You want to leave there with all three of those components. And so I say it that way, and they have to seek where does that come from? So because once you get out in that leadership role, then where do you draw upon, to do that? Where does that come from? And I think the other is there's this soft side of the job. There's the question of I've sat with employees who are passing away of cancer, and this goes on for multiple years. And yeah, they want to come back to work, and how do you preserve that in their mind that we've got a spot for you, get better and come back. And when they realize they haven't, I've sat with people together, at the very end, hospice care, and they're like, they were really glad that they had that opportunity to come back to work, even if it was part-time, because that kept them going. And when they realize the end is there, then they actually do want to have that discussion. And so at that point, if you don't have something, what do you say? And I know what I can say, but I don't know what others say. And I would hate to be spiritually devoid at that point of not be able to say something. And I'd like to tell you that's a one-time occurrence. It goes on weekly. We have issues where people lose a parent, they lose, a child, they're facing some dreaded, disease. I'm going to visit a former professor that I've known for a long period of time who's on a downward spiral next week. And so that's the kind of thing that I can fall back and share. Now that's a leadership outside of my business, but I have all those connections and I have all those opportunities because of the role. And sometimes it just comes to you because people are standing there and it's obvious, they want you to say something. And if
Mhm.
you don't know what to say and you don't have any basis, I don't know what people do. I mean, maybe they just, they can talk around it, and I can't do that. I have to kind of go directly at that. Somebody says, "Hey, you're sitting there at Christmas dinner," and people say, "Can somebody say a blessing?" I mean, what am I going to say? No, I can't do that. Of course, you know, but I don't. I try not to push it on people at all. I don't think that's what we're called to do. We're called to just be ready and have some internal, I guess, philosophy that you can call on, and that's just where mine comes from. And I just as it was interesting too because I do have people that a friend of mine or a colleague, I guess I would say, I've known for a long period of time. He's worked his way up and was just named the CEO of a major company. And I thought about the books I could send to him. I just want to send him. I send him some promotional items from the company, of course, so he can have our hat and all this stuff. But I thought, oh, I'd want to send him a book. So I thought, oh, I could send him the one of the current business books, and there's so many good ones out there. The seven habits of highly effective people, or how to win friends and influence people, or whatever they are. They go back over decades. And instead, I just I decided I would send him a Bible, and I wrote him a letter and said, "Hey, congratulations! I mean, it's not an employee, so I can do whatever I want, right?" So I said, here is the greatest management book ever written, because every aspect of what you're going to cover in this is in here, and then the ones that are impossible because you're at this highest level, you're at the pinnacle of the business. All the easy stuff has been solved. It's done. You're going to get the ones that seemingly require divine intervention, and you don't have that connection, man, it's going to be tough. But everything in there about how to treat people, how to, everything that's happened in since, for a millennium, since mankind, the stories are there and you can learn from them how to invest. And you get to some point, even when you're making capital investments, and you have to say, well, I've done everything I can do. I've exercised all the knowledge I have. And, at some point it comes down to faith. If I could have built this thing or I'm not, and, you have to decide, and you don't want to be foolish based on that. And But what I told our employees, we just had a major expansion, and our engineers did a great job. We built it all, it was on time, but it was empty. I mean, it was production capacity that had no business. And it was built on faith that we would be able to go out, my faith in our salesmen, my faith in our marketing group, and our tech. So I had faith there too, but also had, faith in God that he would fill it up and then create opportunities. And because you can't have faith in when we're in a sold out situation and say, God, give me some more business. I feel like God says to me, not literally, but figuratively, well, we fill up your plant. Where's it supposed to go? Go out on faith a little bit, have some faith, build something, and we go from there. And that's how it actually interacts for me on a personal level. And I tell employees, I have faith in all y'all, but I also have faith that this plant will be filled up in time, and we'll learn from it. And we don't bet the business on stuff like that. And we're not foolish about it. But there is a time in your life and your career and then pick a capital project or hiring people, whatever those are, that you got to make a leap of faith, even if it's just a little one, and not gamble the whole business on it. So those are, just in terms of our subjects, how does, faith work in leadership? I mean, that's going all the way around for me, kind of giving you the broad brush. And I think it would be interesting for you to have a conversation about people who say, okay, if you don't have faith in it, how do you manage those situations? Because I would find that extremely difficult if for me personally. Now others say, well,
Yeah, we probably spent
way. I don't know what they do, but
we probably spent some time, I guess, in our MBA programs, and Peggy, you probably also in decision sciences, so to speak. How do you make decisions based on fact and and evidence-based management and all those kind of things too? But and in the quality realm, a lot of times we spend a lot of time focusing on statistical improvement, and I was talking about Six Sigma, where we're talking about, and you're not talking we got a quantitative course coming up here next semester, where you're talking about the variances on the small end. How do you can tell what's significant and what's not? But at some point in time, like you said, you have to base it on something internal inside of you. And so I appreciate you doing that.
I agree. And that's where everybody looks at you if you're in that leadership role and the discussion is done. It kind of comes down to, Kerry,
Make the
we've
call.
exhausted this thing. We've talked about it for 2 years. Are we going to do this or not? What do you want to do? And I think that's what you're saying. At some point you got to make the call, and I try not to make that alone. I try to,
Yeah.
but
Well, we've been having a really great conversation with Seth, and we're going to break this up into a couple of parts. So we're going to come back for our second part here in just a little bit. So until the second part of our conversation, remember to let your light shine.